Thank you. It's okay. We're good. And before we start the meeting, a few quick public service announcements. For an emergency, please note the exits on either side of the chambers and proceed down the stairs. Bathrooms are located out the door to my left, women's room to the right, men's to the left. We allow 30 minutes for public speaking. If you have not done so, please sign up at the podium. Zoom speakers are only permitted if you signed up by emailing the city clerk by 11 a.m. today. If you did sign up, you must put your camera on so that we could see you before you address the council. Please note that the council has rules of decorum for our meetings, including the public speaking portion. We ask that respect be shown to all, whether they serve on the council, on the staff, or are here as public members. As noted on the signage, we do not allow weapons of any sort, signs mounted on wood, metal, or similar material, or signs larger than 19 by 24. Also, please keep your signs on your lap. Do not raise it so that we do not block anybody behind you. This will help guarantee that we follow the open meeting law. Not only are we here tonight to listen to the voices of the public, but we are also here to run government proceedings. To best serve us all, we cannot have any distractions. When a speaker is addressing the council, no disruptions are permitted. This includes talking over, yelling, and clapping. When this body proceeds with the day's business, we also need no disruptions. As per open meeting law, section 103, interruption of a speaker or government proceedings will not be tolerated. After one warning, anyone interrupting a speaker or the proceedings of tonight's meeting will be removed from chambers. I am now calling this Common Council meeting to order at 7:42 p.m. on December 17th, 2025. If you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. May I please have a roll call?
Alderman Pasty,
Here.
Alderman Tierney,
Here.
Alderman Scott Childress,
Here.
Alderman Edwards,
Excused.
Alderman Mickens,
Here.
Alderman Dennison,
Here.
Alderman Andrews, Alderman Shabbat,
Here.
Alderman Hirsch.
Here.
We have a quorum, but we also may have a technical problem. So if you could all bear with me for a moment. Thanks for your patience. I was told we weren't live streaming, but we are live streaming. So I just wanted to verify that before we continued. Thank you for your patience. We're now entering into the public speaking portion of the meeting. We have allotted 30 minutes for this purpose. Speakers will have 3 minutes. Please be aware that I will give you a verbal 30-second warning. If we don't need to do it at this meeting, we'll do it at the January meeting, but thank you. Please be aware that I will give a verbal 30-second warning. If there are remaining speakers after 30 minutes, I will call for a motion from the council to extend the period for another 30 minutes. Speakers, direct your comments to the chair, as council members cannot engage in debate during this time. Please state your name and address on the record before you begin. There could be no distractions from the audience in chambers or on Zoom when a speaker addresses the council. The Common Council has also received written comments for our consideration, and they can be found on the city's website under tonight's agenda. May I have the first speaker, please?
Shay Kessler.
Good evening, Mr. Shay Kessler, Unit 104B, Fairmount Avenue, Kingston, New York.
I'm a non-ETPA tenant in Ward 1 who supports keeping and expanding ETPA. I work as a care manager, assisting 33 Medicaid clients with their health-related social needs in Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. I have one housing case in particular that has touched my heart so deeply that I lose sleep over it, which does not compare to what this family has been through. This family of 4 lost everything in an accidental house fire earlier this year, and they are incredibly loving and hardworking. And between their credit score requirements and costs, they can't find affordable housing for many reasons outside of their control, despite the fact that my client works full time and pays bills punctually. It has been 8 months and they are still homeless. Now imagine how this would impact individuals on fixed incomes such as disability or retirement. It would be impossible to find housing. And I share this to stress the importance of keeping rent affordable and safe for our community members because everyone deserves to have their basic needs met. I was recently inquiring about an apartment in Ulster County for this family, and while speaking with the landlord, I asked them, I noticed in your Zillow listing that you haven't raised the rent in 5 years. Why is that? The landlord told me, I'd rather keep rent low and steady to secure strong long-term tenants than raise the rent each year for profit and have short-term and unstable tenants. This landlord gets it. My advice to landlords against ETPA is this. If your job is to maintain and fix your properties, then I suggest not spending $150,000 on lawsuits to stop rent stabilization. And if you can't afford to repair your property, then you can't afford to own property. If a landlord can come home to a working stove, working heat, no water damage or mold, then why shouldn't their tenants? Some landlords even went out of their way to drag the names of their tenants in a public hearing. Shame on you. While landlords and developers provide vacancy studies and data to justify rent increases, we as a society need to acknowledge that landlords are privileged and powerful on their own in ways that have real consequences towards everyday people. We're not asking for special treatment. We are asking for the bare minimum, affordable and habitable housing, because we know that the lack thereof is a form of violence against working class New Yorkers. This should not be debatable. It is evident that rent stabilization works to
30
address the
seconds.
affordability crisis. Otherwise, landlords against ETPA would not be so afraid of it. Vote yes to keep rent stabilization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
June Neiman.
Hello, members of council. My name is June Neiman. I'm a tenant organizer working with tenants in Kingston to save rent stabilization. First, I'd like to thank you all for the work that you've put in, the many hours that you've taken to listen to public testimony and reading all of the dozens and dozens of comments that were submitted after the fact. You've conducted an extremely thorough legislative process to make this decision tonight. Here are some of the highlights that I would like to pull out from the record that you have established. Of the 44 reported vacancies that would be justification for removing rent stabilization in our city, tenants provided direct evidence of warehousing, including screenshots of listings for at least 8 of them. Another 3 tenants testified about reported vacancies being occupied for years, long before the study began. One of these was at 7983 Green Street, which reported 7 vacancies. I personally have talked to at least 3 other tenants there who have been living there for many years. That building was also listed for sale this spring, and the listing said that, and I quote, that the units were always rented and that there was a very low vacancy rate. Another building, 58 St. James, reported 4 vacancies, and they had a very similar listing up around the same time. I submitted documentation of every single listing online across 12 platforms in mid-June and mid-September. I found just 4 rent stabilized listings in June and 12 in September, and this was corroborated by an independent report that the city government itself commissioned. In sum, you have ample rationale to question the stated findings of the city to remove rent stabilization due to landlord manipulation. I think it's worth noting that 35 of the 44 reported vacancies came from just 6 landlords. These folks have owned some of the largest portfolios of residential property in the city. So let's look at a few of them. We've got Opus, which reported 10 vacancies. They own 288 units in the region, which is over $15 million property value. You have Neptune, which reported 5 vacancies, and they own 118 units, over $10 million of property value. Sansi Associates, which just listed 1 because they only had 1 building sampled. They own over $23 million of property value in the region. All of these landlords had ample time, ample motive, and ample money to pull this coordinated effort off. So the resolution you are voting on tonight largely does the right thing by using the citywide vacancy rate to keep rent stabilization for all tenants. But I was at the committee meeting the other night when this was drafted, and while I was largely pleased with the outcome, I did notice that some of the essential language justifying this determination was stripped out. We all know
30 seconds.
that Rich over here is going to sue. He has said so himself in the press and will have the backing of the New York City landlord lobby and their many hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're willing to dispose. I encourage you tonight to vote on the strongest possible version of this resolution to make sure that tenants are protected and our community can stay in their homes. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
Leah Wesselman.
Good evening, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing on this. And for those of you who are leaving, kudos and thank you so much for all the hard work and the endless hours that you've put in helping our community. My name is Leah Wesselman. I live on Highland Avenue, Ward 9. I'm going to make this short and sweet. Well, maybe not so sweet. So why are we here tonight? What's a common council doing? What do they do? A common council is a voice of and for the residents of the city of Kingston and enacts and keeps legislation in place in the interest of its constituents. Thinking back on the public hearing last month and based on all these constituents here, again tonight, asking that ETPA remain in place exactly as it is now, I respectfully ask that this Common Council do what's in the best interests of its constituents. Keep the current ETPA in place. People need shelter that's affordable. Thanks.
Next speaker, please.
Ben Surface.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Ben Surface. I'm the supervising attorney of Hudson Valley Justice Center here in the northern counties, working out of Newburgh and Poughkeepsie, but also representing tenants in Kingston. So last week, the Laws and Rules Committee deliberated on how to craft legislation to meet this pivotal moment for tenants' rights in Kingston. And in a straw poll at the beginning of that meeting, every member agreed that in light of the citywide vacancy data and the outpouring of support from constituents, the city of Kingston should maintain rent stabilization at its current level. The proposed resolution that Laws and Rules drafted and that is now before the council affirms what we all know, that there is a housing emergency in the city of Kingston. Third-party data on housing metrics supports this. Public hearing testimony from Kingston tenants supports this. But most importantly, the data produced by the 2025 OHI vacancy study supports this. If only that was enough. What the litigious streak in the corporate landlords in the area has proven to the city of Kingston is that it is not necessarily enough to just be right about the housing conditions in your city. You have to explain why you know that you are right. And this resolution does that. Landlords coordinated their efforts to skew the study. The council heard over and over from tenants, as was said earlier, that units were reportedly vacant while actually occupied or unavailable for rent. Beyond these anecdotes, the study itself demonstrates the coordination. It had a 120% response rate. More people responded than were asked to respond. The landlords coordinated, but thankfully, the study collected additional data about the housing conditions citywide and the vacancy rate citywide. And that data, which was insulated from this landlord manipulation, demonstrated that citywide, there is a housing emergency. In light of the citywide vacancy rate and given the evidence of landlord manipulation, the city is on firm legal ground to continue the housing emergency it declared in 2022 and to declare an additional housing emergency for all citywide rental units. And if we lived in a world where that would be enough, the resolution could end there, but we don't. And so the resolution smartly layers additional protections for specific classes of buildings that the data supports adding rent stabilization protections for. Just looking at the raw data from the OHI study from 2025, when all buildings that should have been subject to rent stabilization to ETPA were counted, buildings with 8 units or more had a
30
vacancy
seconds.
rate of less than 5%. Now, there are some buildings where there's a slight controversy about whether they should have been counted. So if you take those out and you still look just at the raw data, buildings with 9 units or more had a vacancy rate of less than 5%. And so this resolution takes a step of layering protections to make sure that in the face of inevitable litigation from landlord groups, we fight to retain rent stabilization for all units citywide, but also for units 8 or more, and
Thank
also for
you.
buildings
Your
with
time
9 or
is up.
more.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Lisa Lerner.
Hello, I'm Lisa Lerner. I live at 91 Main Street. Thank you, Council, for coming out tonight and participating in this historic vote. It's a cold winter night, and I'm sure we would all rather be in our homes instead of arguing about whether some of us can keep them. I did a little research this morning on housing issues in our country's past, and I came across a campaign speech on the national housing crisis by President John F. Kennedy. He said, "Housing should be sold for homes, not speculation." He painted a very sorry picture of the state of housing for our country's citizens. That was 80 years ago. It's heartbreaking and a little unbelievable that we are still struggling to figure this out. So many eyes are on Kingston right now. We are forging new ground in the fight for truly affordable housing. You are forging new ground. You have met with and listened to your constituents, thought deeply about the evidence of the vacancy study, and I was there as a public witness at the Laws and Rules Committee meeting last week, where you worked for many hours to craft the resolution that you are voting on tonight to ensure that it was fairly worded for both sides. When the numbers of homeless children were read aloud that night, the whole room fell silent. I think we were all a bit ashamed that we cannot provide for our youth, our future. I looked up those numbers again today. In August 2025, the Daily Freeman reported that 96 children were living in emergency housing at the Kingston Motel. The Times Union reported that in September 2025, 542 children were living in motels and shelters. This is happening across several Hudson Valley counties, including our own. Tonight, you have the power to do something for our children, to help families stay in the homes they have. We are working class people in these buildings. We can't afford 8% increases each year. Many of us are working 2 or more jobs just to pay our current rent. I am one of them. Please vote to keep ETPA in place for all covered units. Help Kingston thrive. You
30
probably
seconds.
can't solve the nation's housing crisis tonight, but you can tend to the garden you can touch. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker, please.
May Montaigne.
Hello, I am May Montaigne. I live in Ward 2, and I want to say good evening, council members. Before tonight's vote, I would like to share with you a few final thoughts. Since my involvement in advocating for myself and my fellow neighbors on the matter of the current housing crisis, I've noticed a common thread. After I gave my testimony on November 13th, my landlord was quick to lash out at me publicly, a risk I was aware of and willing to take. The common thread I've found when working with my neighbors is hope eclipsed by fear. Being here tonight and lending my voice to this matter is not only something I want to do, it's something I know I have to do to honor my community. Plainly put, I can't afford to be afraid. If the decision is between standing up for myself and the members of my community who want to stay in their homes or potentially angering those who wish to keep us silent, I'll do my duty as a good neighbor. I would like to humbly thank you all for your time and effort on this matter. I'll state once again how rent stabilization for me means being able to afford both a place to live and an education, a foothold as I strive for the life I've envisioned. I'd like to leave you with one final image. For each person who had the nerve to speak and testify here about the housing crisis in our city. There are dozens more rooting for them from the background, hoping and praying they return home with good news tonight. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Bridget Kelly.
My name is Bridget Kelly. I'm a tenant in Kingston at 672 Broadway. I want to thank the Common Council for being here and preparing for the vote on ETPA tonight. I'm speaking in support of the proposed resolution to continue ETPA for all buildings eligible and urge you to vote yes on the resolution set forth tonight to continue ETPA. I'm going to give some thanks in advance of what I hope is a yes vote for the work that you did and continue to do as I speak for what this means for working people and tenants of Kingston. I admire the courage and commitment to community all of you have to serve in public office. It is not always easy, but it is necessary. Thank you for engaging thoughtfully and with an open mind throughout this process on whether or not ETPA would continue here in Kingston. You listened to hours of public testimony and read written comments on the status of how real working class people and tenants experience the housing market here in Kingston, where availability is low and rents are high. You analyzed data from multiple sources, and the Laws and Rules Committee, of which I witnessed last week, thoughtfully discussed, drafted, and voted on a resolution that recognizes that a housing emergency still exists in Kingston and protects buildings built before 1974 with 6 or more units as defined in ETPA. Thank you for recognizing that it is within this legislative body's legal right to use the citywide vacancy rate, which is below 5% and qualifies for the housing emergency. It is also equally important to include all the buildings allowable by ETPA. These are not just units or buildings, as it is so often referred, but the working people of Kingston's homes. Hundreds of tenants, neighbors, the elderly, children, your constituents could possibly be left without stable or safe housing if buildings of certain sizes were no longer included. If these tenants needed to find new housing, where would they end up searching? In the citywide market of less than 5% vacancy, and without the protections of stabilized rent and protection from landlord retaliation that ETPA and the oversight of DHCR provide. So thank you for recognizing the humanity of tenants of Kingston and the commitment to utilizing the laws of our state to the greatest good of working people. I'm a proud Kingstonian, and I don't want to live anywhere else. We must all continue working on solutions to the housing and affordability crisis and support statewide laws that provide
30
working
seconds.
people with sustainable and permanently affordable homes. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Brandon Esteres.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Estenes. I'm a tenant and Ward 5 resident and a guy who spends a lot of time looking at housing data. It is an established fact of housing economics that within a given city, cheaper units, Class C units, almost always have lower vacancy rates than more expensive ones, Class B and A units. This is true in most places and at most times, barring severe recessions. ETPA units are older apartments and therefore should have less vacancies than Kingston's overall housing stock. And this is true regardless of whether and when rent stabilization went into effect. It's true just because of the age of the buildings. Now, if we're being told that Kingston's case is so exceptional that the Class C apartments have 3 times the vacancy rate as the overall housing stock, we should require very strong evidence to support that claim. So a few months ago, I volunteered with the Hudson Valley Tenants Union for the chance to speak directly with tenants in ETPA buildings reported as having vacancies. I went in genuinely unsure whether the data might be accurate, since, as we know, warehousing is an expensive gamble for a landlord to make. So I genuinely had some skepticism as to what the explanation was. When I started talking to tenants, my doubts were very quickly put to rest. I heard things like, yes, that's right, there are 2 vacancies in this building. Been vacant about 7 years due to code violations. Do those count? So between what I heard from tenants, what we've heard in testimony from other tenants familiar with these vacancies, and from the historical data on the Dutch Village vacancies, which is just eye-poppingly indicative, I think it's clear that many of the reported vacancies were warehoused units or outright misrepresentations. The ETPA vacancy figure is economically unlikely in the first place, and the evidence for it is not standing up to scrutiny. So I hope we can all agree that this is an important time in history to affirm that facts matter and laws apply to everyone equally. So whatever your views are of ETPA, it is the law of the land. And the 2.2% overall vacancy rate is both plausible and methodologically sound. The ETPA specific rate is neither. For all these reasons, I urge the council to rely on the overall vacancy rate in determining the status of the housing emergency and to affirm that rent
30 seconds.
stabilization must continue to apply in Kingston. And just to express a hope, I hope that a fact-based consensus on the legitimacy of rent stabilization in Kingston will allow the system to develop the tools and outlook needed to support the long-term stability of the covered rental stock. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Fred McGovern.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. My name is Fred McGovern. I'm a Kingston resident and an attorney who regularly deals with the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. I'm here to support Resolution 202, which would keep rent stabilization in Kingston on solid legal footing. Litigation is inevitable, so I commend the Law and Rules Committee for drafting a robust court-ready resolution. I'll briefly outline the 4 ways it can survive a legal challenge. First, the resolution leaves the council's 2022 emergency declaration intact. That declaration was based on a 1.5% vacancy rate for pre-1974 buildings with 6 or more units and served as the basis for the council's adoption of the ETPA. Landlords will point to the Office of Housing Initiative's newer 7% figure above the statutory 5% limit and argue the 2022 declaration must therefore be overturned. State law, however, requires the council to make an independent determination. The public hearing requirement makes clear that the study is one piece of evidence, not the only evidence. And while the council must consider the study itself, meaning the methodology and data, the conclusions which OHI draws from the study remain advisory. This resolution reflects the independence which the law expects of the council. The final whereas clause states that the council finds the true vacancy rate for this class does not exceed 5%. Earlier whereas clauses collectively show why the unverified self-reported vacancy data was likely inflated beyond the threshold. And no single justification needs to be decisive. Taken together, they meet the relevant legal standard. Whether that conclusion is more likely than not, given the evidence in the record, a 51% probability is sufficient. Second, Section 1 declares an additional emergency based on the study's citywide vacancy rate of 4.55%. This creates an independent basis for preserving rent stabilization across all eligible apartments, even if the 2022 declaration is invalidated. Landlords will point out the citywide vacancy rate was not the study's primary focus, but the whereas clauses justify the council's independent judgment that this rate is nonetheless sufficiently reliable. Third, Section 3 provides a safeguard by declaring an emergency for pre-1974 buildings with 8 or more units. Including Stony Run, mistakenly omitted by OHI, brings the vacancy rate for this group within the 5% limit, even without accounting for the likely inflation. This protects every eligible
30
apartment
seconds.
except those in 6 or 7 unit buildings. Finally, Section 4 serves as a last resort backup, declaring an emergency for pre-1974 buildings with 9 or more units. It relies on the study as is. Because landlords must defend the study to attack the 2022 declaration, they will inevitably concede the validity of this provision. So at the very least, every building with 9 units or up will still be protected. This resolution gives the lawyers who will defend it a lot to work with.
Thank you.
I
Your
urge you to
time is
adopt
up.
it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Teresa Green.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Green. I live at 305 Hurley Avenue, Stony Run. I am here tonight to thank Alderman Scott, Alderman Edwards, Alderman Andrews, and Alderman Shabbat for the fabulous work you have done representing your constituency in this city. It's not an easy job. It is not. And I am just so thankful for the commitment and the time that you all have put in here. And I just wanted to thank you for your time and wish you a great holiday season. This is your last council meeting of the year, and just wish you the best for your future endeavors. Thank you for what you've done here in your time serving this community. I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very kind. Next speaker, please.
Chelsea Viaba.
Evening, Council. Regarding the 2026 fee schedule, I'm requesting that the fee for firework permit be increased to $350 because fireworks are unnecessary and distressing to local wildlife, animal companions, and people with bomb and gun trauma, including veterans and warfare survivors. I'm also requesting that instead of implementing a bike lane ticket that isn't really enforceable, given the number of cars I typically see parking on the Broadway bike lanes, the city implement actual infrastructure like big planters or rocks, not paint, to separate bike lanes from busy roads. It'll stop bike lane parking, keeping people safer, and letting this city live up to its climate smart status. More people, including tourists, will choose fossil fuel burning alternatives like biking when they feel safer. We need to transform our sustainability culture into one that walks the walk. Thank you to the Common Council members who respect their conscience and community and will vote to clarify that there is a housing emergency in this city. When there are 4 classrooms worth of children living in emergency housing and many others who are housing insecure, we are in a housing emergency. Now, there are civil servants present who publicly question the ability of their constituents to read and write legislation. But tonight is an example of everyday people, working people, showing you not only that we understand government, but that we only accept you working for us. Don't tell us there isn't a housing emergency in Kingston if you own a house. Don't tell us you know what a housing emergency is if you've never needed SNAP to eat or HEAP to stay warm or didn't know how you were going to pay rent. I'm still waiting on my 15% adjustment that realistically is going back into the pockets of Neptune Associates based on Long Island because the property holders of where I live don't even live here. These property holders are content for me to continue paying $1,600 monthly rent, even when it took 2 weeks to repair a broken bathtub, bathroom sink, and kitchen sink, backing up into each other, rendering my home uninhabitable. I'm not here for pleasure. I don't engage in politics and civics for fun. I do this because if I don't fight for me, no one will. If I do not fight for my community, the people who are working 2 to 3 jobs to keep a roof over their kids' heads, the ones at their children's music concerts instead of here because they work 9 to 5s and they need to be with their families when they can be, I fight for them. My representatives certainly won't, not if it benefits them politically to vote against my interests. And while we're on the topic of housing justice, let's ban brokers' fees for tenants who don't hire brokers in this city because there are always hidden costs to being poor. And finally, we need bus shelters. Go talk to the county. They offer to pay for bus shelters as long as the city maintains it. Go get us some bus shelters,
you.
please.
Time is up. Thank you.
And Steve will
Your time
remember
is up.
how you
Thank you.
act
Time is up.
during re-election. So make sure you do the right thing. Have a good night.
So we have two things. That's the end of the 30 minutes, but that was also our last speaker. I will call for a motion to extend if there's anybody in chambers who has not spoken who would like to speak. Just raise your hand. Okay, so can I have a motion from the council? Motion by Michael Tierney, second by Rennie Scott Childress. All in favor to extend for another 30 minutes? Anyone opposed? Okay, we have another 30 minutes on the clock. Ally, you want to come up?
Good evening to this esteemed body, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments this evening. My name is Allie Dottinger. I am a staff attorney at the Hudson Valley Justice Center, providing representation to tenants primarily in Kingston and Poughkeepsie. I'm also a Kingston resident and a homeowner in the 3rd Ward. I want to take this opportunity to encourage this council to pass the 2022 extension of rent stabilization, Resolution 202, which will cover as many units as possible and ensure multiple layers of protection when the resolution is challenged in court. Specifically, I want to highlight for the council the large amount of support from the public record to support the conclusion that the 7.04% vacancy rate calculated by OHI for pre-1974 buildings with 6 or more units is inflated. As a legislative and fact-finding body, I caution you to be wary of relying on the number and survey reporting alone, and especially in light of the public testimony and the 120% response rate from property owners. You are not bound by OHI conclusions alone, and nor has the Laws and Rules Committee put forth a resolution that is doing so. The work has been done to review the data, to review the testimony. As has been pointed out throughout the process, warehousing of units, despite being an unethical practice in a housing crisis, is not an illegal practice. However, if a unit is being warehoused, it's not up for rent. As such, that unit is not for rent and is not vacant within the meaning of the ETPA. The ETPA statute affords the legislative deference to this body. This body has the legal responsibility to take the data collected through the survey process and to analyze it. This body has the responsibility to consider all relevant information and testimony when coming to a conclusion regarding what the vacancy rate is. The record supporting the 7.04% vacancy rate being inflated is the number that further provides legal justification to rely on the citywide vacancy rate when extending the housing emergency. Thank you to the President and to this Council for leading an active and transparent process to review this data and fully examine testimony. As your neighbor, I invite you to stand with our neighbors. Litigation is inevitable, but there is legally sound resolution that has been drafted that is backing up this decision.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has not spoken who would like to speak? Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I will end the public speaking portion. Before we continue, I have another 2 things. First of all, I would just like to thank you all. I know most of this room has been out to meetings repeatedly over the last 4 months. I know it's close to the holidays and you would probably all prefer to be with your family, and you're here. So I just like to thank you for being part of this process with us. I also would like to just go over what we're going to be doing for the rest of the meeting. We do have 4 resolutions before Resolution 202, and we will do them in order because they're going to be quick. And then that way we'll have all the resolutions complete. If you would like to leave after the vote of Resolution 202, you're more than welcome to. But I also will invite you to stay. I will be honoring our 4 outgoing council members if you would like to stay, but you do not need to. So that will be the rest of the evening. Thank you. And that will conclude public speaking. And we're now going to enter into the report of committees, starting with resolution number 198.
Resolution 198 of 2025. Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York to approve the 2026 fee schedule as amended.
On the question, hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted 8-0. Moving to resolution number 199, please.
Resolution 199 of 2025. Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, requesting a 2025 budget modification in the amount of $46,801.70 in the city clerk's office to balance accounts.
On the question, hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted 8-0. Moving to resolution number 200, please.
Resolution 200 of 2025. Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, requesting a budget transfer in the amount of $13,567 in the Department of Public Works to cover shortfalls in various accounts.
On the question, hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted 8-0. Moving to resolution number 201, please.
Resolution 201 of 2025. Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, authorizing a 6% relevy penalty for the 2025 and recommending approval for adding water department charges to the 2026 property tax bills.
On the question, hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted 8-0, excuse me. Moving to resolution number 202, please.
Resolution 202 of 2025. Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, declaring an emergency requiring the regulation of residential rents pursuant to the Emergency Tenant Protection Act.
On the question, Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion to make some amendments on this resolution. These were amendments that we ended up not putting in the last Laws and Rules meeting, but some of them do need to be put back in, and also fixing some building numbers in one of the sections.
And everybody has. the
Yeah, so
amendments
everyone
in front of
has
them.
a copy of the amendments in front
Okay,
of them.
so, and you've all looked at it?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Michael Tierney. Any discussion on the motion to make these amendments? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. This is to vote just to make these amendments. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the amendments are adopted 8-0. So now we are back to the resolution. It's the same title, so I won't have, you don't have to read it again. Any discussion on resolution 202 with the amendments? Alderman Bob Dennison?
After considering all the information available to me, I intend to support the resolution. I've read the vacancy study prepared by the Office of Housing Initiatives. I attended the public hearing conducted by the Common Council, reviewed data provided by New York State DHR, talked to the Rent Board Chair, reviewed the report from the independent consultant, and have had several conversations with tenants and landlords. One of the most telling things to me is that no Kingston landlord has taken advantage of the process that exists for rental adjustments that are possible if expenses warrant an adjustment. This fact is very troubling to me. It's important to remember that the ETPA applies to about 17% of our rental housing stock, and this action alone does not address our housing shortage, which in my opinion can only be solved by the creation of more housing. I want to give the mayor and his staff credit for moving in that direction. I'll be voting in favor of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch?
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight, we are here to cast our last vote of the year on a pressing issue that weighs heavily on our community: housing availability and the urgent need to declare a new housing emergency under the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, or as we all know, ETPA. Declaring a new housing emergency utilizing a citywide net vacancy rate of 4.55% would continue to provide crucial tenant protections to approximately 1,000 Kingston households during a time when the federal government is removing the most essential safety nets for the most vulnerable populations. Our commitment to our constituents requires us to look deeply into the facts, and supporting the emergency declaration with sound arguments is not just necessary, but imperative. This past May, I had the privilege of attending the oral arguments at the New York State Court of Appeals, where our very own corporation counsel, Barbara Grace Poller, spectacularly defended this council's 2022 declaration of a housing emergency to opt into the Rent Stabilization Act of 1974. In response to the judge's questions at the Court of Appeals oral arguments, our corporation counsel argued that the 2022 resolution was entitled to some of the deference normally afforded to legislative acts because the ETPA expressly set up a system where the council needs to make an independent judgment that is not limited to just what the study, but also takes into account the mandated public hearings. While the Office of Housing Initiative's current findings did not make any claims about the citywide vacancy rate other than presenting it for informational purposes only, the ETPA requires the council to make its own determinations based on the underlying study. We have analyzed the findings of the Office of Housing Initiative's 2025 vacancy study, along with a look at the actual data in the study, independent of their findings, to arrive at our own conclusions, which is in with the council's purview under the law. Given that the council did not define the parameters of the study, the definitions of vacancies, nor the timeline in which the study would be carried out, it was imperative for this council to examine the data separately from its findings to arrive at our decision. First, let's start with data, particularly from the U.S. Census. The 4.2 vacancy rate is not merely a statistic. It is a reflection of our community's housing landscape. This figure emphasizes that despite any conflicting data, we have a credible and contemporary basis to understand our local situation. It underscores the necessity to act, especially as the data we examined is not isolated, but part of our comprehensive analysis that includes findings from multiple sources that have been brought forth during our ongoing legislative process that began this summer on August 20th. The treatment of different ETPA properties in the study was a concern, and the categories they were placed in were a concern. 90 Fairview Avenue was treated differently from 305 Hurley Avenue and 672 Broadway. The landlord of 305 Hurley Avenue had applied for an exemption from DHCR, which was denied. The landlord at 90 Fairview Avenue had applied for an exemption, which was granted. Both cases are being appealed, yet the buildings weren't categorically treated in the same way. Stony Run was put into the dubious category rather than being part of the ETPA sample. Yet the 90 Fairview buildings at issue were not put in the dubious category. They were left out altogether. 672 Broadway was put into the dubious category rather than the ETPA sample on nothing more than the landlord unilaterally claiming an exemption, even though the same landlord registered the building with DHCR. No determination by DHCR or court has been made to date. Their inclusion in the data is relevant. First, just as OHI recommended, are using the vacancy rate for buildings with 22 plus units, the council can do the same. By including 305 Hurley Avenue in the ETPA sample rather than part of the dubious category, the vacancy rate for pre-1974 buildings with 8 plus units no longer exceeds 5%. Second, when combined with other indications of inflated vacancies, incorporating these 3 properties results in a net vacancy rate for pre-1974 buildings that does not exceed 5%. We believe there are some anomalies with some of the vacancies reported in the study. Turning to the issue of misreported vacancies, we have troubling examples from 753 to 755 Franklin Apartments, 7983 Green, 58 St. James. At the Green Street address, reported vacancies masked real tenant occupancy, and at the Franklin Apartments were held from January and February 2025 until October 7th when they were finally listed for rent. 58 St. James, the first rent roll submitted contained 2 vacancies, but the survey reported 3 vacancies. A second rent roll was submitted on May 28th, showing 4 vacancies, yet the building was put up for sale, and marketing materials from June 2025 that we received in written public comment described the buildings as fully leased. These misrepresentations need to be discredited as they not only skew data, but ultimately mislead us in our decision-making process. Furthermore, in the analysis of rental data, not all landlords submitted complete rental data, a full year's worth, or alternatively claiming and explaining why it was unavailable. Most landlords did not do that, and thus those incomplete submissions should not contribute positively to their reported vacancies. Given this context, the council is justified in leaning towards the use of citywide vacancy data. The treatment of different ETPA buildings in this study was a concern, and the categories were, I'm sorry, I've lost my place. So the citywide vacancy rate presents a more complete picture of our housing situation. What we are faced with is not simply a set of numbers, but the lived realities of our residents. We have the tools and data to act decisively. The decision to declare a housing emergency under ETPA is one that prioritizes the needs of our community above all else. Let us be resolute in our commitment to provide adequate housing and support for all residents. By declaring this emergency, we can continue to uphold the law that this council passed in 2022. It is our obligation to provide meaningful protections and take essential measures to ensure that everyone in our community has access to safe and secure housing. In closing, I would like to address the landlords that spoke about their expenses. Please report your expenses to DHCR when the time comes next year to do so. It is the Kingston's Rent Guidelines Board job to adjust rents based on reported information. It is not under the council's purview to discontinue the housing emergency due to finances. We are obligated to examine vacancies at this time. Thank you to my colleagues in this process, and thank you to our community groups and constituents for stepping forward in collaboration with us to do what is good and what is just for our community. Thank you.
Alderwoman Terrell Mickens.
Yes, good evening, and thank you, Madam President. I wish to express my strong support for Resolution 202. As everyone knows, Kingston is a renter majority city. Approximately 52% of Kingston households rent their homes, and more than half of those renters are rent burdened, paying over 30% of their income for housing. This stress test alone indicates a persistent imbalance within the rental housing market and heightened risk to household stability. We do recognize that Kingston is fortunate to have a cadre of small, independent, and fair-minded landlords that are genuinely interested in the well-being of their tenants and their property. We are thankful for them. They are our neighbors. However, it is clear that other interests have been attracted to Kingston, driven by what appears to be favorable cap rates and an inflated return on investment, particularly following the migration of families during and post-COVID. Coincidentally, perhaps, recent eviction data from 2025, January through November, note 192 residential eviction warrants issued in Kingston, exceeding the total number issued in all of 2022. And these figures capture only those cases in which a warrant was ultimately issued. These displaced families destabilize neighborhoods and schools. It impacts the very diversity and neighborhood character that served to attract so many to Kingston in the last 5 years or so. We have heard the difficulty of our displaced and housing insecure neighbors and what they face in securing alternative housing within Kingston. This difficulty is reflected in the citywide vacancy data. The city's most recent vacancy survey estimates the citywide rental vacancy rate of 4.55%. This estimate is corroborated by the U.S. Census Bureau's ACS survey, which reports a 5-year average vacancy rate of 4.2% for Kingston. Both estimates fall within the statutory threshold that defines a housing emergency. Further, Section 3A of the ETPA provides that the existence of a public emergency requiring the regulation of residential rents for all or any class or classes of housing accommodations is a determination that shall be made by the local legislative body. The statute distinguishes between declarations applicable to all housing accommodations reflecting the citywide rental market and declarations applicable to a defined class of housing accommodation. It further provides that a declaration of emergency shall be made as to all housing accommodation where the vacancy rate for housing accommodations within municipality does not exceed 5%. Subsection C of Section 3 requires that such determinations be made following a public hearing held on adequate public notice. This requirement underscores the council's role in making an independent legislative determination informed by, but not limited to, vacancy studies. Testimony and written submissions received during the public process may properly inform the council's assessment as to whether reported vacancy rates accurately reflect prevailing market conditions. Tenants do not confine their housing searches to regulatory subclasses. Accordingly, the relevant market for purposes of assessing a housing emergency is a citywide rental market rather than discrete building categories. While other tenant protections such as good cause eviction address procedural fairness in eviction and lease non-renewal, it is not sufficient to control rent increases during a housing emergency. The ETPA operates by establishing predictable, uniform limits on rent increases applicable across covered units, thereby addressing the structural drivers of displacement in tight, constricted housing markets. And so, based on citywide vacancy rates, rent burden data, public testimony, and eviction trends, the evidence supports the conclusion that a housing emergency continues to exist in the city of Kingston. The City Council has both the statutory authority and the substantial evidentiary basis to continue the housing emergency declaration and associated tenant protections under the ETPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alderwoman Sarah Pasty?
Rather than repeat what my colleagues have already so eloquently expressed, I want to simply state that I have read all the materials presented to me, attended all public hearings, met with both landlords and tenants and the head of the Rent Guidelines Board, and based on the facts presented to me, I will be voting in favor of this resolution.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alderman Rennie Scott Childress?
I've been on the council for some 10 years now. One of the very first big issues that we faced was the question of whether we could transform the county's former almshouse and office building into housing through RUPCO. It was a major fight, major battle, a lot of people with a lot of different ideas on different sides, but ultimately we were able to rezone that building and provide a pilot agreement to make it into what now is a fabulous place for low-income people who also need various types of services. I've been proud since I've been on the council that we have attempted many different types of approaches to the housing question. Very early on, I held a series of 8 housing hearings where we met with different people involved in the housing issue, and it was clear from that that we had a long way to go. Since then, we've used pilot agreements creatively. We saved Yasmin Towers and the Governor Clinton building for low-income seniors. There was a threat that those buildings would be sold and go to market rate housing for anyone, but we saved them for our seniors. We've developed several innovative programs to improve and extend our housing stock. We were the first municipality in the state to pass good cause eviction, and our actions spurred the state to develop the same legislation for the entire state. We developed a new zoning code, which allowed us to limit the number of short-term rental units so that we wouldn't lose lots of our housing to people who are visiting, so we could make it safe for the people who are living here. We also made it possible to develop through that more types of housing in innovative sorts of ways. So we also have used innovative funding and pilot agreement to support the construction of 164 units that includes supportive housing out at Golden Hill. While we're immensely proud of the work that we've done in this time, we know all too well that there's more to be done, that we keep having a struggle because of the nature of our current economy. Because of that, we understand the necessity of passing this legislation, of maintaining our rent guidelines. Without that, we would run the risk of losing so many of our tenants, so many of the people that we hold dear to our hearts. We want to understand too, whenever we think of this, housing is not a commodity like so many things, because it's not just housing, it's people's homes. And when we're talking about people's homes, there's something much deeper in terms of what that means, both to the community and to the individuals living in those places. We're not talking then about individuals. We're talking about the relations among all of us. And we have to protect all of us if we want any of us to have the value and the comfort of home.
Thank you. Alderman Michael Tierney.
Thank you, President Schott. Prior to my time here on the council, I served as one of the members of the Rent Guidelines Board. And during that time each year, we hear from both tenants and landlords about the economic conditions that they are facing in determining what the rental adjustments will be for the next 1 or 2 years. And during that time that I was on the Rent Guidelines Board, the first year, no landlord reported their earnings and income. The second year, still fewer than half of landlords reported their earnings and income. And that, I believe, is still the case, even though I'm no longer on that board, that pattern. So it was shocking to me that the response rate of the vacancy study, as originally conducted by the Office of Housing Initiatives, reported a 120% response rate. That stands in stark contrast to the contempt that property owners have had for the Rent Guidelines Board, and points in my mind to a level of coordination that had almost immediate, that occurred prior to the study almost immediately. Following our inquiry into the study in our Laws and Rules meeting, we had our public hearing in which we heard from over 100 tenants who live in those buildings, who sought housing in those buildings, that those vacancies simply did not exist. We heard from one of my constituents on Green Street that they lived in one of the vacant units. We heard that over and over again. We heard that from our constituents outside, or maybe future constituents who have sought for months to try and live here, yet cannot find an apartment where there are vacancies. But I'm struck by the public comment that was said over these years. We heard from teachers, from nurses, from veterans, from retirees to new parents. The people who spoke were the people of Kingston. They represented us demographically, culturally, and statistically, and they said that the vacancy rate was below 5%. I believe that we have a moral and legal obligation to continue the 2022 rental emergency for as many units as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Steve Shabbat.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd just like to take a moment here just to thank the committee for taking on this laborious task to protect some of our most vulnerable population. If I could digress for just a second, as my colleague says, we've been at this for a long time trying to protect tenants. When I was fresh out of college, which is, yes, a long time ago, I worked for the Department of Social Services, and I was a caseworker, and tenants had absolutely no rights back then. I was the only line of defense. They would call me, I would have to call the landlords on the phone, and literally plead for protection for the clients. So this is certainly a welcome change to see these kind of protections for our citizens. I appreciate the efforts. This is, in the scheme of things, some of the things we've done over the years, this is probably some of the most work that was done on any one topic. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for all your hard work. I will be voting yes on this.
Thank you. Alderman Drew Andrews.
Let me start out by stating that I will be voting in favor of Resolution 202. Rennie Scott, Alderman Scott Childress, made me think of when I first made my first run for alderman, I lost because of support for the Alms House, now Landmark Place. Um, and I felt saddened, not because I lost, but why I lost, because I supported community that needed a place to live, that needed something. I go home every day, and I'm blessed that I have a place to go, but I'm also saddened deeply that there are people out there. There are our children living in hotels, some living on the streets. My heart hurts, and I do all and will always do all I can to support our community, because that's what we are here for. If we're not here for each other, why are we here? Right? So the way I look at it is, there's a philosophy called Ubuntu, which is a South African philosophy, meaning I am because we are, which is part of my work. It has always been my work since I've obtained a job at age 14. But being on this council opened up to me how much work is in this, is in supporting our community, and that we need to support each other by any means necessary. By any means necessary, we need to be here. I've listened to constituents uh, on a regular basis, and like I said, my heart hurts. There's never a question when it comes to what can we do to support those most in need. And some of us are working poor. We're working hard. Inflation is hitting us. And it's our job as those elected by the people to do what needs to be done for the people. So of course, I have to be in favor of Resolution 202, no question.
Anyone else? You all spoke, but you do get 2 times. Otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote. All right, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Resolution 202 passes 8-0. And that concludes our communications. You are more than welcome to stay. I will be honoring the 4 members if you would like to stay for that. If not, I'll take my time before I go to the podium to do that if you would like to duck out and get home. Thank you again for being here and sharing your voices with us, and have a great holiday season.
Thank you. Then you're gonna go next time.
Thank you. Hey, how's it going?
Good, nice job up there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But they will.
Yeah, I'm so happy.
Been fighting for this for 3 years.
I'll see you next week. I mean, some of us are not. All right, I'm gonna start the rest of the meeting in a couple minutes. So if you're gonna stay, please find your seats. I don't want to gavel. I feel like it's inappropriate to gavel in this joyous moment. Oops, that's on. All right, everybody, we're going to get started with the end of our meeting. So if I could have silence in the council or in the chambers, please. Should I hit the gavel? Sorry, I was trying to avoid hitting the gavel, but I do want to get started with the next portion of the meeting. Before I invite the outgoing members to be honored, I do want to close the meeting in memory of 3 KPD officers who have passed this week. So first, I'd like to close in memory of Sergeant James Brophy. He began his career with the Kingston Police Department on January 19th, 1971. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant on January 22nd, 1976, and served the city of Kingston with distinction until his retirement on July 4th, 1999. Sergeant Brophy represented a generation of officers who built the foundation of professionalism and dedication that our KPD continues to stand on today. My condolences to KPD and Sergeant Brophy's family and friends. I would also like to close in memory of Detective Ira Bell, who Detective Ira Bell was hired on May 31st, 1980, and was promoted to the rank of detective in 1989. Detective Bell retired on September 4th, 2000. Detective Bell dedicated his career to the pursuit of justice and public service, leaving behind a legacy of hard work and integrity. Detective Bell continued his life of service by becoming the Director of Security at Kingston High School. Again, my condolences to KPD and Detective Bell's family and friends. Lastly, I'd like to close in memory of Officer Michael Ryan. Officer Ryan was hired by the Kingston Police Department on March 9th, 1996, and retired on March 23rd, 2021. His commitment to service did not end there, as he continued to serve the public with the Town of Ulster Police Department until his passing. Officer Ryan's lifelong dedication to law enforcement is a reflection of his deep sense of duty and service to others. Mike dedicated his life to public service. He began his career with the Ulster County Sheriff's Office and was hired by the City of Kingston Police Department in March of 1996. During his 25 years with KPD, Mike was a highly respected and dedicated member of the Emergency Services Unit, where he rose to the role of team leader. He played an integral role in tactical operations and training, including combat medical training, defensive tactics, and firearms instruction, not only for the Kingston Police Department, but throughout the region as a member of the Ulster County Law Enforcement Training Group. In addition to his role as an instructor, trainer, and tactical operation, Officer Ryan was a proud member of KPD's Honor Guard, representing the agency and the uniform in all in KPD's ceremonies, parades, and formal functions. In addition to his law enforcement career, Mike proudly served his country as a member of the United States Air Force. After retiring from KPD in March of 2021, Officer Ryan continued his commitment to serving others by taking on a training role with the Town of Ulster Police Department, a position he held until the time of his passing. He tragically passed away on Saturday, December 13th, while responding to an injured hiker in Shandaken as a member of the Phoenicia Fire Department. My condolences to KPD, Town of Ulster Police Department, and all of Officer Ryan's family and friends. And now at this time, I'm going to go over to the podium and invite one of you at a time. All right, so I'm going to start with Jeannie Edwards, who's not here, but I would like to explain why Jeannie Edwards is not here. She leads the warming center, and her staff was not able to come in for health reasons, so she had to be there. So even though she's not here serving the community, she is still serving the community where she is. So I want to thank her for that. So I have a little message for Jeannie. I don't know if she's tuning in, but hopefully, I'll send her my words and hopefully she could listen later. Jeannie, you have spoken about how challenging it is to serve on the Common Council, which I imagine may have come as a surprise. I say this from my own experience and from hearing the same from numerous current and former council members. The work is not only long hours of meetings, all hours of constituent service, working with colleagues who have differing opinions to find a consensus, and the very nature of government, its need for detail, the very slow pace, and how confusing and challenging it is. If I say this, will I get the city sued? Are we preempted? Is this the role of the legislative body or the executive? It's hard work. And Jeannie, you did it. You stood up to serve your community and you did it. And you did it while wholeheartedly focused on the community's best interest. Between DJ's Memorial Playground, honoring Joe Fay's legacy, and ensuring the council is considerate of our Latinx community during the Big Ugly Bill deliberations, you should be proud of your accomplishments. I am proud of you, and on behalf of the Common Council, I thank you for your dedication and service to the council, to Ward 4, and the city of Kingston. So here's to Jeannie Edwards. And now I'm going to ask them to join me. So Drew Andrews, can you come to the podium, please? When I asked my spouse tonight what I should say about Drew Andrews, he immediately said community-oriented. And I wholeheartedly agree, and his speech today was all about community, so it reinforced it anyway. Although I'm gonna go with, instead of community-oriented, I'm gonna just call you Mr. Community from now on. Everything you do, everything you say has the community front and center. There's no doubt in my mind that you took on this role to better Kingston, and I hope you see the difference, your thoughtfulness and attention to others' perspectives, whether it's council, staff, or public, the difference that you have made by doing that. I know for sure that you, Mr. Community, have made this city a better place for kids of all ages. I thank you for bringing your energy to the council, and on behalf of the Common Council, thank you for your service to the council, Ward 7, and the city of Kingston. Thank you very much. Whoops. And I invite you to say a few words if you would like.
Just a few, a few. Somebody said earlier, short and sweet. So, thank you, Madam President. So I just want to, like I said, short and sweet. For Ward 7, you know, I've lived in my ward for a long, like over 20 years, and you know, I thank Ward 7 for placing trust in me, you know, and voting for me. It has definitely been an honor. I will continue doing the work. I'm in the ward. I love my neighbors. I show up with heart, honesty, and respect for all of my constituents. And I'll continue to do the same thing anywhere I go. So if you see me out, you know, still give me some love. To the mayor, I thank the mayor for his confidence in trusting me. to do the work. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that he gave me and for my council colleagues. This work is hard. this is hard. This is hard. Woo. It gets you. Some nights I can't sleep. Some nights I can't sleep, and I sometimes I think about, well, what are they thinking? You know. So it definitely gets me. I know it isn't easy, but it's definitely meaningful and heartfelt. And you guys together, just watching you guys do your work, your research, your speech, kind of even giving me a little, true, what do you think? Even inviting that, as a newbie to this work is really, really deep, and you guys will forever be in my heart and be my inspiration here in Kingston and on the council. You guys changed a lot of lives, a lot of lives. Tonight, everything you guys did, everything we did, but it's not about me right now, it's about you. So, thank you. Keep standing up for our city and our people. Your voice it matters more now than ever, for us, for the next few years. As a matter of fact, it's been an honor to work with all of you, and a big congratulations to Mike Ham, our new elected Ward 7 alderman. So thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite up Alderman Steve Shabbat. These may be a little emotional for me, so bear with me. I've served with these two my entire time here. So there's one word I regularly hear community members use when describing Steve: kind. Even after a decade of serving, the hard work, the yelling constituents, the long hours of budget meetings, Steve's reputation for his kindness and genuineness will be a large part of his legacy. And that is special because there's nothing more important than being kind. Thank you for being a role model for all of us in that regard. But also thank you for your commitment to the city for all these years. Serving on the finance committee all those years, I started to do the math of how many hours of budget meetings that would be, but then I realized lawyers don't do math, so I just gave up. Serving as the chair of public safety, and especially serving as the chair of community development. I say especially because that role suited you to a T. Guiding the committee through the CDBG process is quite the challenge, and you did it with thoughtfulness and passion. This makes sense because of how passionate you are for Kingston and its people. This was obvious through all of your service, and for that, Kingston is honored to have had you serve on the council for all these years. On a personal note, given both of our strong family connections to Kingston, I can't believe it took me until this year to realize we have relatives in common. Between that and our shared years on the council, I hereby declare us family. In seriousness, thank you, Steve, for all your devotion and your efforts. I appreciate you greatly and will miss you dearly. And on behalf of the Common Council, I thank you for your service to the council, Ward 8, and the city of Kingston. Say a few words.
Well, full disclosure here, I really didn't envision being here 12 years. And when I think back, when I ran, I had black hair, I had a little goatee. Times have changed. I have new grandchildren since I've been here. It's been quite the ride. And I know the phrase an honor and a privilege is used quite often, but this indeed has been working with you folks, councils past. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve, and especially In case you don't know, I know I've said this a million times. I was serving in the ward that I grew up in. Still live there. Obviously, I'm the alderman, but I grew up downtown. Loved it down there. I'm always telling stories about downtown. We had a great time, and it was just so cool to be walking around, running for office in the neighborhood you grew up in. It was great. But for the most part, I've had a lot of fun. There has been a couple trying moments, shall we say. I've been sued. That was a dark moment. I had a triple primary one year. Not a good time. That was a little stressful, I guess you would say. But I want to thank all of you for being who you are. This was a great way to go out. I've been here many years. I don't think I've ever seen a council full of people be as happy as they were tonight for a decision we made. And that's what a good way to walk out the door. I mean, it's great. But I would like to thank my family for giving me the time to do this. It's been difficult over the years to leave a ball game or, leave a birthday party and say, sorry, I got to go to a meeting now. But my family's been gracious about it. I appreciate that. It wasn't a struggle. They realize the importance of it. And for those of you taking over now, good luck. My replacement is here, Ruth. She's going to do a great job. She will be dedicated to the task. So anyway, all I can say is thanks for having me all these years. It's been great working with you guys. Hopefully I will see you. I'm sure I'm not going to be a stranger. I'm going to be serving in some capacity with the city. So I'll still be involved, and I will see you guys around. And that's it. We'll get together and tell stories again. All right? Thanks, everyone.
I would now like to invite Alderman Rennie Scott Childress. Last but certainly not least, our fearless majority leader and my partner on the council. You have brought intelligence, calmness, and your infamous wit to every meeting. You have thoughtfully led through many contentious issues, the municipal ID program, the gun safety resolution, pilot agreements galore, the citywide zoning reform, and reforming the police commission, as well as many a budget meeting. You've relentlessly pushed to lower the citywide speed limit and move forward with charter review. And this is just a small list of your accomplishments as our majority leader. But just as importantly as getting the work done, you always made sure it was done in a way that gave everyone the opportunity to share their voice. That's a true sign of a leader, and the council is better because of you. And on a personal note, I could not have done this work without you. You were calm when I was panicked. You kindly pulled me back from the ledge on numerous occasions. You were a steady sounding board for me. And most importantly to me, you were ready to have my back at a moment's notice through my mother's illness and then through my own illness. I will always consider you to be a dear colleague and friend, and I thank you for everything you have done for me, for this council, and for Kingston. And on behalf of the Common Council, I thank you, our majority leader, for your devotion, compassion, and service to the council, Ward 3, and the city of Kingston.
Oh, beautiful. That would be former majority leader. I was struck when we were talking about the legislation we just passed about the word community. And I think the value of a council like this is that we do represent the community. We bring these different aspects of community together. It can be a struggle sometimes because we, unlike the mayor, have to deal with each other. And sometimes we don't see eye to eye. But that doesn't mean that we can't work out those differences, even sometimes when it's a significant struggle. But I think that because of that struggle, whatever we have done has been better for it. We have a constant check and a balance in each other. And I think that's what really brings a good community together, is when everybody's able to go through that process with each other. Beyond the people that we see here, I want to acknowledge that whatever we did, I have a lot of faith in the people who work for the city. So Alyssa and Kwame are here representing the entire city staff. It was very important to me to give the community award to 3 of our first responder groups, DPW, police, and fire, at our last regular meeting. But I want to note that I think our city is in good hands with a lot of the folks that work here. Dan Baker, John Toohey, Barbara Graves Poller. I still count as one of my most important moves retaining John Toohey when he was looking for another job, because he hadn't gotten a raise in like 87 years. And I was like, but you're the comptroller, that should be your... So he was on the verge of taking another job, and I said, no, we can't allow that to happen. And we've been taking advantage of his institutional knowledge, his skills, his strategies and tactics for a good budget. And without the work of all the folks in the city, we would not be doing very much on the council. I also want to thank all of our constituents in the city, those who are deeply involved, deeply caring. We've seen tonight how many people will show up for important issues. And I hope that we can work toward a greater involvement of folks in the city. I'm talking with some other people about the possibility of developing different kinds of community development, not in the traditional sense, but more in the sense of how do we actually get folks together to meet, to talk, to be good community members with each other. So I hope that all of you will join us when you hear of anything like this going on. I look forward to the good work of those who are replacing us. I see Marissa is here. So I look forward to good things from her and the other members who are joining the council who are also here, showing their dedication by being here when they don't need to be. You know, because when they finally get to sit there, they're going to bring in the big bucks with the salary that you get for being on the council. I think it works out to $6.30 an hour, something like that. That might, yeah, -6. Yeah, that's not counting the therapist bills and the emotional toil. All right, so I thank all of you. I really have, you know, enjoyed this. It's a great honor of my life to be in this position. Thank you for the trust that you put in me, and I look forward to seeing you all around at whatever bar it is. Good night, everyone.
So with that, can I take a motion to adjourn? Motion by Rennie Scott Childress, second by Drew Andrews. All in favor? We are then hereby adjourned until the next regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday, January 6th, 2026 at 7:30 p.m. Thank you all and have a good night.